amazing YouTube channel, Sewing in Switzerland. I'm very happy to have you here. So today we are very tentatively going to dip our toes in some controversial waters. We're going to be looking at big four patterns versus indie patterns. I know. People seem to have very strong opinions when it comes to the big four versus indie patterns. To be honest, I'll give you my opinion up front. I'm on the fence. I love big four patterns. I actually find them excellent to use, to work with. I enjoy their styles very much. But I do also love the indie patterns. However, I think there are pros and cons to both, so we're going to be looking at those today. And I would very much like it if this was a discussion, so I would really love it if you would let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we can just kind of chat about it a little bit more, because I'm really keen to see what other people's opinions are and whether that is even a thing for you. Like, is the big four versus indie patterns like a discussion topic at all? Should we just take it off the table and accept them both as is? Who knows? There are no right answers in this discussion. I'm not going to sit here and say you're wrong, it's XYZ. Absolutely not. I value all of your thoughts and all of your opinions on these sewing matters. I am happy either way with both big four and with indie, so I don't really have any skin in the game, but I am very interested to hear other people's thoughts. So let's start with some pros and some cons. I'm just checking my notes. So let's start with the sizing. Pro for the big four, and do you know, I'm just going to clarify, I'm saying big four here, but it is more like big seven. So we do tend to refer to the major sewing pattern houses as the big four, and that's because the Simplicity group did accumulate and has over the years kind of been accumulating other big pattern companies. So if you go onto the Simplicity website, you've actually got Simplicity Patterns, you've got New Look Patterns, Butterick Patterns. She's very sleepy for a dog who hasn't done a lot today. Who else have you got? You've got some Birder style patterns on there now. You've got the new Know Me by Mimi G range, and that's basically independent designers under this New Me brand, or this New Me hood. And Mimi G has kind of taken on these sewing designers, but also some are like sewing, I want to say influencers or sewing bloggers that have stepped into fashion design and pattern design. So it's really cool. It's a really great way to find other sewists and other pattern designers. So it's really great. Just checking who I've missed. Oh, of course, you've got Vogue and McCalls all under that name as well. And there are some other indies. So I know that Sew House 7 has a very small range with Simplicity, and obviously you've got the Gertie ones under there as well. So it's morphed into something really big actually, and not just the big four main brands, but we do still tend to use the name the big four when talking about them. So just for clarification, that's what I mean when I'm talking about the big four. I kind of mean the hood that encompasses everyone. So moving on, sizing is pretty stable. It's pretty standard across the big four. There isn't much margin for differences. If you buy a McCall's pattern and you buy a Simplicity pattern or a Vogue pattern, they are very similar in their size range. With indie patterns, they do use their own blocks, so you're going to have a large variety of sizing, and that can be absolutely wild. You can be, you know, one size in one company and another size in another. It can differ greatly, so you have to be very, very conscious of that when looking at indie companies. So what have we got next? This is the controversial one. Okay. Paper patterns. Paper patterns, my friends. How do you like your paper patterns? So with the big four, they tend to come in tissue paper format. And that has changed slightly over the last couple of years or so. You do get some now that have that thicker paper format, but as a general rule of thumb, they come in the tissue paper format. And there are some people in the sewing community that vehemently hate tissue paper patterns. I, for one, am not a fan. They tear so easily, they get scrunched up, they're impossible to fold and put back in the packet. You need like some sort of engineering degree to just put it back in the packet. Like, I really struggle. And then you've got the indie pattern companies. If you buy their paper patterns, they tend to come in a much kind of thicker, not quite cardstock, but thicker than your average paper, certainly. Paper format, so they're easier to cut out. I find them easier to read. I find them easier to handle personally, but I know some people are die-hard tissue paper fans, and they say, I have asked reasonings behind this madness. I have asked, and basically the tissue paper, when you lay it against the fabric, you can see through the tissue paper to match up the grain line. You can see the fabric underneath. You can check if anything's kind of warped or move out of place. It's a lot easier to handle with the fabric underneath, whereas if you're using the indie pattern paper, it's so much thicker that it can be harder to pin and to manipulate and kind of get that close cut if you're a very precise cutter. So that is one. And also with tracing patterns, I'm a huge fan of tracing patterns. So if I buy a paper pattern, I will then trace it because my weight fluctuates quite a lot. So I do need access to different sizes. Whereas that's much harder to do with the tracing paper versions because, you know, they're very fragile. I find them very fragile anyway, but maybe I'm just heavy-handed. So I'm really keen to know what you all think of paper patterns and whether you're pro tracing paper or whether you're pro that thicker, I want to call it cardstock, but it's not, because it's not card, but it is much thicker than paper. So yeah, so the way that they are produced are often slightly different as well. So okay, let's talk about price very quickly. So it used to be that the big four patterns were much cheaper. They were way cheaper than the indie patterns. Indie patterns have always been traditionally on the higher end of the pay scale, of the price scale. So the big four used to be that you could get them for like a couple dollars, a few dollars, US dollars that is. And they've been steadily, I would say, increasing their prices over the last couple of years. And they're now actually quite expensive. So I looked on the Simplicity website today to just try and gauge the patterns. So this is valid as of today. And the price ranged from about 15 US dollars, which I would say is pretty standard for a indie pattern as well, to about 25 US dollars for a single pattern. And that is on the steep end. And I would price indie patterns as slightly cheaper, to be perfectly honest, than the Simplicity patterns. But I would say that is a very recent price hike, because they were usually around between 10 and 15, but then they're now much higher, I would say. So I'd be interested to see if anybody else has noticed this price increase. But that said, I haven't really noticed a price increase on the indie side of things. So you do have sewing or indie sewing companies such as Seamwork who do like a subscription service, where you can pay like an annual fee and then get access to all of the patterns, or you can buy them as you go. But I would never say that I've come across one that is more than 25 US dollars. So I would say they have all tended to be cheaper, but again, this is my personal experience, so I would be interested to know what you think. So now here is where I'm going to get a little bit controversial, because I'm having a bit of a nightmare with them at the moment. So if you go onto the US site for Simplicity, they have the new patterns that they've released for summer. They are ready and available and you can purchase them. Now, they are only released in paper format. You cannot go onto their website and purchase PDF patterns. Like, I cannot find any at all. And so all of their new patterns and the new Nomi range with the new designers are all on that, and I'm so desperate to make some of these patterns, so desperate, and I just cannot get a hold of it whatsoever. So I thought, okay, no worries. Okay, there's no PDF, and I was a bit ticked off about that, I have to be honest. So I went onto the Simplicity UK site, which is also not only the UK site, but the only site available for the whole of Europe that stocks these patterns. And they had the spring mccalls collection on there, and that was the latest collection, and we're in beginning of June now, whereas the US site has their summer collection available to see, in the new Nomi collection that I really want to get my hands on. And so the UK site is lagging behind. It doesn't have all those new patterns out yet or available to see. And I thought, well, why is there such a time difference between the US ones and the UK ones? And then I saw on the UK site for the Simplicity group, the big four patterns, is called sodirect.com. And then I saw that they do a subscription service where you could pay £28 annually, which is a really good deal, and you get, from that you get 2 free, sorry, I've got pins and needles. From that you can get 2 free patterns per year, which is pretty good. That kind of pays for itself, really. And you get access to like what is essentially pre-sales. So before the patterns are launched, you get like advanced access before anybody else does, which I thought, hey, that's okay, that's pretty nifty. Might come in handy if there's something, you know, like around Christmas time that you really want to make, or, you know, party garments or whatever. That would be pretty handy. So I reached out to Simplicity on the US Instagram account, and I questioned if they would be stocking the new patterns in PDF format. And aside from that, is there anywhere in Europe that I can actually purchase them? And the answer came from the UK Simplicity company under So Direct. And they said that there are no PDFs, but they're coming soon. But fair enough, it's a bit woolly. There's no concrete information. But that you could either purchase on the sodirect.com site and have it shipped to Europe, or you could buy from one of their recommended sites under the FAQs. So I checked the FAQs, and they do have specific sites across Europe. So I checked the one for Switzerland, and the website is not as snazzy as the So Direct or the Simplicity one. It does need a little bit of work. It's not easy to read. And a lot of the patterns, obviously being in a partly German speaking country, are in German or are in a different language, which my preference would be to have it in English for ease. I could get by with the German one, but for me it would just be easier to just buy the PDF one on the website in English, and away I go, print it, job's good. So that was pretty difficult to navigate. So I thought, okay, well, how much is the shipping to Europe? But there was no information. You had to actually go through the purchase process just to get the shipping information and make an account and so forth. So I can't tell you who it gets shipped with or how much it costs at the time of making this video. So then I checked the Simplicity UK Instagram account, and they had the Know Me patterns on there, and they said on there, if you have the annual subscription, you can access these patterns on our website. So that pre-sales, that early advance access that I was talking about is now available on the Simplicity UK website. And I thought, okay, but these aren't patterns that are extremely new. There is no real pre-sales. They are available to purchase on the American site, on the Swiss site, and in paper format, only paper format. But for the UK site, you have to pay for that annual 28 quid just to access being able to purchase the patterns. And I thought, okay, at first I thought, yeah, great deal, cracking. But now it's like, okay, so you have to pay a subscription just to access the patterns that are available for sale. So I've gone round the houses all day long just trying to find a way to purchase these patterns. It's bonkers. The inaccessibility of these patterns and being able to purchase these patterns is just bonkers. And to only have paper format is just wild. I mean, and now if we compare it and run that comparison with the indie side have advanced past PDF patterns, okay? Most indie companies now offer the option to purchase the projector files if you use projectors for sewing. So you don't even need to print anything with the indie companies now. You can just download it, set your projector up, and there's loads of really great resources. I know Minimalist Machinist on Instagram, she's made a wonderful guide for projector sewing, so I'll link that in the description for you. So it's just crazy. It's crazy. So indie patterns have kind of moved past the need for paper even, and you can just go directly onto the fabric, which is just wild. Whereas the big four, I can't even get my hands on a paper pattern, let alone a PDF pattern, which doesn't exist. They just do not have them at the moment. So for me, the indie patterns takes the winner with that one, because I've lost a day just trying to find access to these patterns, which is just absolutely bonkers. Whereas the indie ones, you could just go online, bish bash bosh, you've got a PDF, you know, you can just print it out or send off the A0 files and get them printed out, etc. There are so many ways that you can get access to these now. Or do the projector file if you've got projector sewing. So for me, the inaccessibility of these patterns is a really big deal. Just not being able to get hold of them is a huge red cross in the big four side of things for me, on a personal note. So that's been my personal experience today. So we've discussed pricing, sizing, tissue versus paper, and of course PDF versus paper versus just being able to get hold of the pattern would be a great start. So I would love to know, as always, what you all think of this. And truthfully, am I being a little dramatic? Am I asking for too much for having a preference that is the PDF patterns? Should I perhaps find a way to get the Simplicity patterns? Or do I have a right in feeling frustrated? Because I think it's a justifiable frustration to feel like this. But I would very much love to know your thoughts on the whole indie versus big four. So do please leave me a comment And if you have not, I would very much love it if you would like and subscribe. Do you know, I practice saying that and I still trip over my words. If you would please like and subscribe to my channel, that would make me very happy. Thank you so much, and I wish you all a great day. Bye.